Odysseus left Troy commanding 12 ships filled with battle-tested warriors. 10 years later, he returned home alone. Every ship had been destroyed. Every man under his command was dead. Ancient tradition remembers Odysseus as one of the cleverest heroes in Greek mythology. A man who escaped giants, resisted enchantments, and survived the wrath of the gods. But survival alone does not make someone a great leader. So were his men destroyed by monsters and divine punishment? Or did they die because the most intelligent man among them repeatedly made decisions that placed everyone else in danger? To answer that question, we must follow each loss. Not only what happened, but who made the choice that caused it. When Troy finally fell, Odysseus appeared to have achieved the impossible. For 10 years, the Greek armies had failed to break the city's defenses. Odysseus helped devise the wooden horse, the deception that allowed Greek warriors to enter Troy and open its gates from within. He had earned a reputation for intelligence, persuasion, and unconventional strategy. Now he wanted only one thing: to return to Ithaca, where his wife Penelope and his son Telemachus had waited through 10 years of war. Odysseus did not begin the voyage alone. He commanded 12 ships, each carrying men who had survived the Trojan War. These were not inexperienced sailors. They were veterans who had endured siege, hunger, disease, and battle. On paper, Odysseus possessed everything a leader could want: ships, experienced men, a homeland waiting for him, and a reputation built on victory. But his greatest strength contained the seed of his greatest weakness. Odysseus trusted his own intelligence so completely that he often believed he could enter danger, control it, and leave whenever he chose. That belief would first cost him. After leaving Troy, Odysseus and his fleet attacked Ismarus, the city of the Cicones, who had supported the Trojans. The Greeks seized treasure, food, and women. Odysseus ordered his men to leave quickly. They refused. They remained on the shore, eating, drinking, and dividing the spoils while surviving Cicones summoned reinforcements from inland. By morning, a larger force attacked. The fighting continued until the Greeks were driven back to their ships. According to Odysseus' own account, 6 men from each ship were killed. This was the first major loss of the voyage, and responsibility was already complicated. Odysseus had participated in the attack, but he also ordered the retreat. His men ignored him. Was this evidence that the crew lacked discipline? Higher evidence that their commander no longer possessed enough authority to control them? That distinction matters because the same pattern would return again and again. Odysseus would recognize danger. He would issue an order. His men would disobey, and he would survive the consequences. After escaping Ismarus, storms drove the fleet off course. They reached the land of the lotus eaters, where some sailors consumed a plant that made them forget their desire to return home. This time, Odysseus acted decisively. He dragged the affected men back to the ships, tied them beneath the benches, and ordered the fleet to leave. He had saved them from surrendering their purpose. But on the next island, Odysseus would be the one who refused to leave. The fleet reached the land of the Cyclopes. Odysseus selected 12 men and crossed to investigate. They discovered a cave filled with cheese, livestock, and stored food. His companions immediately proposed the safest plan: take what they needed and return to the ship. Odysseus refused. He wanted to meet the cave's owner and discover what gift of hospitality the stranger might offer. That decision is one of the most important in the entire story. The men were not trapped by an unavoidable storm. They were not attacked at sea. Odysseus chose to remain inside an unknown cave because he wanted to see who lived there. The owner was Polyphemus, a one-eyed giant and a son of Poseidon. Polyphemus sealed the entrance with a massive stone. Then he seized 2 of Odysseus' men, smashed them against the ground, and ate them. Odysseus could not kill the giant in his sleep because no human there could move the stone blocking the exit. So he developed one of his most brilliant plans. He offered Polyphemus powerful wine and told him his name was Nobody. When the giant collapsed, Odysseus and his men drove a heated wooden stake into his eye. Polyphemus screamed for help. Other Cyclopes called from outside, asking who was hurting him. "Nobody," Polyphemus answered. Believing no attacker was present, they left. The next morning, Odysseus tied his surviving men beneath the giant's sheep. When the blinded Cyclops allowed the animals outside, the Greeks escaped beneath them. It was a perfect demonstration of leadership under pressure. Odysseus had created the original danger, but once trapped, he remained calm, protected the survivors, and defeated a physically superior enemy through intelligence. The men reached their ship. They were safe. The crisis was over. Then Odysseus turned back. He shouted across the water, mocking the blinded Cyclops. His crew begged him to stop, afraid that Polyphemus could locate the ship by sound. Odysseus ignored them. He did something even more dangerous. He revealed his true name. If anyone asked who had blinded him, Odysseus declared, "Polyphemus should say it was Odysseus, king of Ithaca." Bonte hero wanted credit for his victory, and because he wanted the enemy to know his name, Poseidon learned it too. Polyphemus prayed to his father, asking that Odysseus never reach home, or, if fate allowed it, that he arrive late, broken, and without his companions. The curse did not excuse everything that followed, but from this point forward, the sea itself had become Odysseus' enemy. His intelligence saved his men. His pride made their journey far more dangerous. Aeolus, keeper of the winds, received Odysseus generously. He placed the dangerous winds inside a leather bag and left only the wind that would carry the ships toward Ithaca. For 9 days, Odysseus guided the fleet. Then the fires of his homeland came into view. The voyage was almost over, but exhausted from handling the ship himself, Odysseus fell asleep. His men looked at the bag. They believed Aeolus had secretly given their commander gold and silver while giving them nothing. They opened it. The imprisoned winds exploded outward and drove the fleet back across the sea. This disaster was directly caused by the crew. But it also revealed a leadership failure. Why did men who had fought beside Odysseus for 10 years believe he might hide treasure from them? Why did they not trust him enough to ask? And why had Odysseus told them so little about an object capable of destroying their journey? Nemeolus refused to help a second time, concluding that Odysseus must be hated by the gods. The fleet sailed away again. 12 ships had survived: Troy, Ismarus, Storms, Lotus Eaters, and the Cyclops. What happened next would destroy 11 of them in minutes. The fleet entered the harbor of the Laestrygonians. The harbor appeared protected by high cliffs, with a narrow entrance offering shelter from the open sea. 11 captains sailed their ships deep inside and tied them close together. Odysseus alone kept his vessel outside the harbor, secured near the entrance. Whether this was caution, suspicion, or instinct, the decision saved his ship. The inhabitants were not ordinary people. They were enormous cannibals. When the attack began, the cliffs became killing platforms. The Laestrygonians hurled rocks down onto the trapped vessels, smashing wood, crushing sailors, and blocking escape. Men were speared like fish and carried away to be eaten. Because the ships had entered the enclosed harbor together, they had nowhere to maneuver. Only Odysseus' vessel, positioned outside, could cut its rope and escape. In one attack, the fleet fell from 12 ships to 1. Odysseus' caution saved the men nearest to him, but hundreds of others died while following the broader movement into the harbor. Once again, the result contained 2 truths. Odysseus was more alert than the other captains, and once again, he was the man who escaped while those under his command did not. Now the survivors had only 1 ship. Every future mistake would affect everyone at once. The surviving ship reached the island of Aea, home of Circe. Odysseus divided his men into 2 groups. A party led by Eurylochus explored the island and found Circe's house. She welcomed the men with food and wine, then used her magic to transform them into pigs. Eurylochus escaped and warned Odysseus. Odysseus immediately went to rescue them. With help from Hermes and a protective herb called moly, he resisted Circe's enchantment, threatened her with his sword, and forced her to restore his companions. Once again, He risked himself for his men. This matters. Odysseus was not a commander who simply abandoned anyone who became inconvenient. He repeatedly entered danger to recover his people. But after the rescue, the crew remained with Circe for an entire year. They ate, drank, and rested while Ithaca remained far away. Eventually, it was the crew, not Odysseus, who reminded their commander that it was time to leave. This reverses the earlier pattern. At the land of the Lotus Eaters, Odysseus forced his men to remember home. On Circe's island, his men had to remind Odysseus. Before they departed, Circe told him that he must enter the realm of the dead and speak with the prophet Tiresias. There, Odysseus received a warning so clear that no one could later claim ignorance. If the crew harmed the sacred cattle of the sun god Helios, their ship and every man aboard it would be destroyed. Odysseus would survive, but only after terrible suffering. The ending had been revealed. Bythe's only question was whether the commander could prevent it. Before reaching those cattle, however, he would knowingly sail his men toward another monster. Circe warned Odysseus about the Sirens, whose song drew sailors toward death. Odysseus ordered his men to plug their ears with beeswax, but he wanted to hear the song himself. He instructed the crew to tie him to the mast and refuse to release him, no matter what he said. As the Sirens sang, Odysseus begged, commanded, and threatened his men. They ignored him and tightened the ropes. The ship passed safely. The plan worked because Odysseus understood his own weakness in advance. He did not assume he could resist temptation through willpower. He created a system that prevented him from acting when his judgment failed. This may have been one of his best acts of leadership. He gave his men the authority to disobey him. But the next danger offered no safe solution. Ahead lay two threats. On one side was Charybdis, a violent whirlpool capable of swallowing the entire ship. On the other was Scylla, a six-headed monster who would seize one sailor with each head. Circe advised Odysseus to sail near Scylla. 6 men would die, but the ship might survive. Odysseus accepted the calculation. He did not tell the crew exactly what was waiting. Instead, he ordered them to row and prepared his weapons, even though Circe had warned that. Fighting Scylla would accomplish nothing. The monster struck from above. 6 sailors were lifted from the deck, calling Odysseus' name as they disappeared. He later described it as the most terrible sight he witnessed during all his travels. Was his decision correct? If he had chosen Charybdis, everyone might have died. A leader sometimes faces choices in which no outcome is good. But the moral question remains. Did Odysseus have the right to conceal the cost from the men who would pay it? And could they still be called his decision to make when he knew he would probably not be among the 6 selected? The survivors passed Scylla, but they were now approaching the warning Tiresias had given them. And this time, Odysseus told the crew exactly what was at stake. The island of Thrinacia belonged to Helios. His sacred cattle grazed there. Odysseus wanted to sail past the island entirely. Eurylochus challenged him. The men were exhausted. They had rowed through terror and watched 6 companions die. Eurylochus argued that refusing them one night of rest was cruel. The crew supported him. Odysseus gave in, but made them swear not to touch the cattle. Then the winds changed. A storm trapped the ship on the island for approximately 1 month. The crew consumed the supplies Circe had provided. They survived by fishing and hunting birds until almost nothing remained. Hunger replaced discipline. Odysseus prayed to the gods and fell into a deep sleep. While he was absent, Eurylochus persuaded the others to kill the cattle. His argument was desperate, but understandable. It was better to risk punishment from the gods than to die slowly from starvation. When Odysseus awoke and smelled the meat, he knew what had happened. The crew had violated a direct order. They had ignored a prophecy. And they had chosen the act that everyone knew would bring destruction. At first, nothing happened. The storm ended. The men returned to sea. For a moment, it seemed that the warning had been empty. Then Zeus struck the ship with a thunderbolt. The mast shattered. The vessel broke apart. Every surviving member of the crew was thrown into the water. Not one of them lived. Odysseus alone clung to the wreckage. The prophecy had been fulfilled exactly. But the manner of its fulfillment makes responsibility difficult to assign. The crew killed the cattle. Eurylochus encouraged them. Zeus destroyed the ship. Poseidon had already turned the sea against them. Yet Odysseus had also led them into the Cyclops cave, revealed his name, lost a year with Circe, accepted the sacrifice at Scylla, and repeatedly failed to preserve trust and discipline. No single choice killed every man. Their destruction was the result of a chain. Pride created the curse. Mistrust released the winds. Poor positioning trapped 11 ships. Fatigue weakened obedience. Secrecy surrounded Scylla. Hunger destroyed restraint. And the final punishment completed everything that came before. Odysseus drifted alone for days before reaching the island of Calypso. The goddess kept him there for 7 years. She offered him comfort and, according to the poem, the possibility of immortality. But he continued to long for Ithaca. Eventually, the gods ordered Calypso to release him. After another storm and another shipwreck, Odysseus reached the Phaeacians. There, at a royal feast, a poet sang about the Trojan War. Odysseus began to weep. The people around him celebrated the story of Troy as heroic legend. Odysseus remembered the men who had actually died there, and everyone he had lost afterward. When he finally revealed his identity, he did not present himself only as the architect of the wooden horse. He told the story of 12 ships becoming one, and one ship becoming a piece of wreckage beneath a solitary survivor. The Phaeacians carried him back to Ithaca. 20 years after leaving, Odysseus reached home. But he did not return as the commander who had sailed from Troy. He had no fleet, no army, no companions who could confirm his story, and no certainty that his family would still accept him. Athena disguised Odysseus as an old beggar. More than 100 suitors had occupied his palace, consuming his wealth and pressuring Penelope to choose a new husband. The younger Odysseus might have announced his name immediately. That was what he had done to Polyphemus. But the man who returned to Ithaca had learned the cost of being recognized too soon. He observed. He tested loyalties. He revealed himself only to those he needed. He reunited with Telemachus and planned with his son rather than acting alone. During Penelope's contest, the suitors attempted to string Odysseus' bow. None could do it. The beggar asked for a turn. He strung the bow easily and fired an arrow through the aligned axe heads. Then he turned the weapon against the men occupying his home. With Telemachus and loyal servants beside him, Odysseus killed the suitors. The violence was not the emotional end of the story. Penelope still refused to accept him without proof. She ordered that their marriage bed be moved. Odysseus reacted immediately. The bed could not be moved, he said, because he had built it around the trunk of a living olive tree. That secret proved his identity. Penelope finally embraced him. And here the journey revealed its final contradiction. Odysseus began his wandering by shouting his name to an enemy who did not need to know it. He ended it by proving his identity only to the person who had the right to demand it. At the beginning, he wanted recognition. At the end, he wanted reunion.
So, was Odysseus responsible for the deaths of every man under his command? The answer cannot be reduced to yes or no. His men repeatedly made disastrous choices. They refused to leave Ismarus. They opened the Bag of Winds. They demanded to stop on Thrinacia. They killed the sacred cattle despite direct warnings. The gods also intervened, especially Poseidon and Zeus. And some dangers, like Scylla and Charybdis, offered no perfect solution. But Odysseus was not merely an innocent victim of fate. He entered the Cyclops' cave unnecessarily. He revealed his identity out of pride. He failed to build enough trust around the Bag of Winds. He remained with Circe until his own crew pushed him to leave. He concealed the full danger of Scylla. A leader cannot control every action of every person. But leadership is measured partly by the conditions a commander creates, whether people trust him, whether they understand the danger, whether discipline survives exhaustion, whether success belongs to everyone, or only to the man who lives long enough to tell the story. Odysseus was courageous. He repeatedly risked himself to save his men. He was also brilliant, adaptable, and capable of making decisions under impossible pressure. But he was proud, secretive, and sometimes convinced that intelligence allowed him to control dangers he had chosen to approach. Perhaps that is why his story has endured. He is not a perfect hero. He is a great man whose strengths and weaknesses are often the same qualities. His intelligence saves the crew. His confidence leads them forward. His pride brings Poseidon's curse. And after every man has died, his gift for storytelling ensures that the version we remember is his.
Who bears the greatest responsibility for the destruction of Odysseus' crew? A. Odysseus, because his pride and leadership failures created the chain of disasters. B. The crew, because they repeatedly ignored clear orders and warnings. C. The gods, because no mortal commander could defeat divine punishment. D. All three, because the tragedy required every failure to happen in sequence. Choose one answer in the comments and explain which moment most strongly supports your decision. And one more question. Would you have chosen Scylla and knowingly sacrificed 6 men? Or risked the entire ship against Charybdis?
Subscribe for weekly stories about the leaders, decisions, betrayals, and turning points that shaped history and mythology. Not only what happened, but why people made those choices, who paid the price, and how the consequences survived long after them. In the next chapter of this series, we will examine the person who fought her own 20-year war without ever leaving Ithaca, Penelope. Because while Odysseus faced monsters across the sea, his wife used deception, patience, and one final test to prevent his kingdom from disappearing. Odysseus's voyage was over, but the other Odyssey had been unfolding at home.